It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Wednesday, January 18th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that wants to be talking about a Kevin Hayes hat trick, but we got to talk about Ivan Provorov and skipping warmups.
So typical.
Oh, the Flyers. All right, let's get the show going.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Rachel Donner. I am here with Russ Cohen, as always, on Locked On Flyers. And I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. He's on Twitter at Sportsology. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Flyers. You'll keep up to date with all the Flyers news and our episodes. You can also email the show at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. We are going to talk about that Ducks game last night. We're going to get into some good points, some bad points, and the Ivan Provorov of it all. And then we will get to some mailbag questions today. The show is free and available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, wherever you are listening right now. Subscribe. You'll get all of our episodes here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Plus, we're over on YouTube. So subscribe there to see our smiling faces, or grimacing in this case, because Russ, man, I am flustered. I don't know if you can tell that I'm flustered, but I am just absolutely flabbergasted at what happened with Ivan Provorov. So he doesn't go out there for warmups. People think he's scratched. He shows up on the roster for the game and he's out there on the bench, and people were speculating as to what happened, and rumors started swirling that he skipped warmups because it was the Flyers Pride Night game and he did not want to wear the Pride Night jerseys for warmups that had all it had was rainbow numbers and lettering. And I gotta say, it's extremely disappointing. Not only that he couldn't go out there for warmups, or even consider wearing a regular jersey and not wearing it if it was a deeply held religious belief, according to Torts. It's just disappointing on his part. It's disappointing on the organization's part that they didn't scratch him. And I'm not sure how, the fan reaction to this is going to be in terms of wanting him around anymore.
It's bad. It's already bad. There's no covering up for this. It's not only disappointing, like if there's a lot of different things you could cite religious belief for in the world. Wearing this jersey is not one of them. It's just not. It's a positive thing. It's about just inclusiveness. It's about togetherness. There is nothing that would ever stop somebody from wearing it because it's, sends the wrong message or something like that. It's ridiculous, and I really don't like or approve of the way any of this was handled.
No, and it flies against the stated values of the organization, not only
Yes.
in the organization and having a Pride Night and the kinds of, promotional activities that they have around it, but their work year round. And, they've had some really positive steps forward. I mean, this team is far behind a lot of other teams in the league, to be clear, in terms of inclusivity, but they've made, strides in terms of creating an inclusive atmosphere in the building that you can get thrown out for saying homophobic slurs or racist
on the broadcast
slurs.
they were doing a bit more it's been better the last since they first started.
Yeah,
And now this sets them back.
It really does. And the fact that they had to put out, a statement saying we support the LGBTQ community to try and head off the publicity that was going to happen. I just don't understand why, from a business perspective, a higher up than John Tortorella wasn't involved in this decision, whether or not to scratch him, because that's, failing in the workplace. That everybody else, on every other person on the team wore it. I mean, they've had a couple of players, Scott Lawton and JVR to be specific, who've been extra active in the LGBTQ plus community. And, it lets down your teammates.
Yeah, this is something the whole team is doing, and this is something now that one guy didn't. And again, it's just the wrong time to pick religious beliefs. Like that's just my problem with this.
No, I'm as upset as your cat is, Russ, because I think that it's absolutely, unconscionable in this day and age. Yeah, it's absolutely inconceivable to me that he thinks he can do that. And the fact that he got away with it, it,
It makes it worse. It
it
really
makes it
does.
so much worse. Like what did the team think was going to happen here?
I'm not sure, and it really it's going to be worse the day after. Like the what's going to be written about it, what's going to be said about it, the groups that are going to be posting whatever they might say. Like this isn't going to just go away in a day. This is a a stain. It's a bad mark, and I'm just upset about it.
Yeah, and again, especially after the team, I think, has made slow but steady progress on this front in terms of being more inclusive across the board. And I think that um, there's room here for him to have these religious beliefs that he feels strongly about and not, you know, cause a
Why
problem
this
like
year?
this.
Why now? They've done this before. This is not their first
Well,
Pride night.
no, it's not their first Pride night, but it's their first time where they've had Pride themed jerseys. In the past, they've had Pride tape on their sticks and it was optional, so he just didn't do it. And so that is the difference here, but it's not like, I mean, other teams have like fully designed Pride themed jerseys for warm-ups with a different logo and all this. This is literally just putting rainbows on the numbers and like, come on, dude. Anyway,
Like, what if it
I'm
was
really
SpongeBob? Would he cite religious belief for that? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I know. It's just ridiculous. Like the whole thing is ridiculous. And the fact that the team doesn't know how to handle this from a PR perspective is a problem. But Kevin Kay's got a hat trick in this game, first of his career. Wish I could be celebrating that a little bit
yeah, it'd
more.
be nice if we could really, it was interesting because, early on in the game, I think he was kind of being selfless again on the power play, and the 5-on-3 looked bad. And then I think he was like, all right, I just have to shoot here because this is getting silly. And that really started something good for him on the evening.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd like to really be able to fully embrace that. I'm still, having a little trouble, but hey, I'm happy he did have a good night. The power play did not have a good night. I mean, they did score a goal, but it was not a good night for the power play. Um, that's a constant, I guess, in this season. Sam Urson did fine. Look, Stolarz is a good goalie. The first period was a little worrisome though because they were pouring it on and they only had one goal, and that a lot of times that doesn't turn out well. So
Right.
this is a case where it did, and that's good. You won one that you should have won, and coming off the Boston loss, you know,
Exactly.
that's a positive.
It really is, and I think, to continue the conversation about Kevin Hayes a little bit, one of the things that we've talked about is that third line being a little discombobulated,
Yeah.
with Hayes and that Lawton centering, with Wade Allison, and they've really, I think, improved over the last
Hmm.
several games. I really think they've built a little bit of chemistry. Scott Lawton is amazing at creating plays. Like
Yeah.
he has really just such good vision, and so he set up the shorty to Ristolainen, which we'll get to, but and then
Yeah.
he
This
also
is his
set up
by
that
far the
second
best
Hayes.
season. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just love what's happening there. And I think Wade Allison is learning to play with them much
Hmm.
better. And you saw him like get a little bit more involved in this game, as far as connecting between the three of them a little bit better.
Yeah, like Allison is a very good complimentary guy for these guys, and it's working out well. And yeah, it is a positive because this is probably not a line we would have said would have happened because we probably wouldn't have put Hayes this far down the lineup, but it's working.
Yeah, it's it's a good thing, I think, for all three of them. I think
Hmm.
Hayes getting back on the scoreboard a little bit more, looking like he was earlier in the season. Lawton continuing to have a great season, and Wade Allison being part of that mix as well. We have a lot more to talk about with this game, as well as maybe some potential new jerseys next year. So we're going to get to that coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. You've got the football playoffs, basketball, soccer, esports, and of course the NHL. They've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts like ours, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet online, where the game starts. Russ, continuing our conversation about last night's game, and I think the Rasmus Ristolainen of it all has
Hmm.
to be, other than Kevin Hayes, the biggest highlight. Him finally getting on the board for the season, and a shorthanded goal to boot. I think it was so nice and such a good reward for his hard work and really molding himself to be a much stronger defenseman than he has been in the past.
Yeah, I think again he's doing exactly what the team wants him to do. He's been executing for a while now. Now the snarl has come back. He gets a goal here, which is fantastic, and you could tell by the way he scored it, like it was like, yeah, okay, now things are starting to roll the right way for me. It was really nice to see. He's a good guy, and he's a really good team guy here.
Yeah, and it was a really pretty shot too.
Yeah, it was actually. He has it in him, but he's not going to, try and do that all the time. But this was an opportunity, and look, it was it was better than Maxime Comtois' break. We'll say that.
Yeah, oh man, the Flyers are so lucky that the Ducks are terrible
Oh
because
yeah,
I think they were playing a little fast and loose for portions of the game. I think it was partially because they were tired, but I think that against a much better team, they would have had some trouble during portions of this game.
yeah, yeah, no doubt. But I mean, again, a win is a win is a win, and there's certainly positives to cite here. And I just wish it had really could have been a nice celebration here, but I guess that's
Yeah.
just wasn't in the cards.
Right. Oh, also a really nice goal from Morgan Frost.
Yes.
Lest we forget, between the legs and up and over.
Yeah, this time doing it in the right zone.
Yep. Yep.
So that's a positive as well. So yeah, I mean, ultimately this is a really good effort. Uh, I think that there's going to be an extra narrative now attached to this game, and that's not fair to everybody, but it's just the way it's going to be.
Yeah. Man, poor. I just feel so bad for Kevin Hayes. It should be his night, and it's not. But we'll see what the fallout of that is in future days, and we'll talk about it on tomorrow's show. In the meantime, over at Aesthetics, they are the go-to source for New Jersey information. They had retweeted a post about the Flyers potentially having new home and away jerseys next season, but they had a source confirming that it wouldn't affect the logo, but it's gonna be a different design than what we've seen with the reverse retros.
Yeah, it's interesting because about a week ago somebody had said to me that Um, they were kind of getting tired of like too much orange. And so I kind of wonder now, and again, I was surprised to hear that from a Flyers fan. So I do kind of wonder now, are they going to tone down the orange? Do we have any idea of that yet?
We don't. That's really the only information we had on it, that, they're not gonna mess with the logo, and it's not gonna look like the reverse retros, but, I can see them going back to more of that black style jersey from the '90s. I personally like the orange. I think that, of the teams in the league that have orange in their colors, I think the Flyers do it best. The Ducks orange is not nice. I think the Oilers orange looks terrible because it's with a weird blue,
Right,
and the
their blue
Islander,
isn't great with it.
yeah,
That's the problem, but
yeah,
I've always thought the Flyers orange is good. Obviously,
yeah.
being a Met fan, I certainly like orange, and done in the right way, I think it looks good. I personally would not like to see them stray too far away from that, but I do kinda wonder now if this is where in the 21st century they're gonna kinda go. I don't know that, I mean, I have no idea.
Yeah, it's hard, I think, to redesign the Flyers jersey. I think it's just been so classic that every time you try and mess with it even a little bit,
Yeah.
that it gets away from them somehow. So if somebody can pull it off, like, more power to them. I just think it's a rough jersey to try and do anything vastly different with, because we all remember that stupid chrome logo, and that was a disaster. So, we don't wanna go there, but if they went back to the black one or something along those lines, I think a lot of people will like it.
Yeah, I agree, I think that would work.
All right. We have some mailbag questions to answer on today's show. We'll get to a couple of them now and a bunch more in the next segment. But the first one from Louis is about some prospects. Going forward, what do you see the development plans being for our top prospects, such as Gauthier, Brink, Denoyer, and Forrester? And what do you see their ceilings being?
Well, Gauthier is, has a ceiling to be a top line player. I think he should go back to BC for another year. I've cited the reasons really because playing center, I think under a John Tortorella system, you're really going to have to be completely solid at both ends, and I just feel like he's going to want to wait a year on that, just to for his own sake, for the right development of it. I just think it makes the most sense. Denoyer is going to be a guy that has a lot of tools, and we're always going to cite that he's a great skater and everything, but he is really going to have to round out his game. And give him the best chance to round out his game, I think he's going to have another year with the Phantoms for sure. Brink clearly needs the rest of this season to
Definitely.
get where you say, okay, I forget he even has a hip injury. So I think that's pretty obvious. Then bring him into camp. I would hope the Flyers would have a good enough team that he wouldn't have to start or have the pressure to start the year in camp with the team, so that hey, if he plays like 6, 7 games in the A and he's ripping it up, then you could always bring him up. I just feel like let him get this development, and he's missed development time here. And while it may not show at the beginning, it always does rear its head, even at some point in a guy's career. It could be late in the season, so I just don't want to see him hit the wall. So I think they have to be careful about. And Forrester, look, let him have a great summer. I think he needs to just finish out the year in Lehigh. Hopefully, he's their best player by the end of the year. He's close. Uh, Let him have a great summer of training, and then we'll kind of see where he's at. Again, he's only going to be 21 going into next season. So if he starts out in the AHL, it's no big deal. Like there are teams like the Red Wings and other teams that let guys play 2, 3 years in the AHL. So don't get caught up with, and hung up on that.
Yeah, I think you're right there. And of Brink, Denoyer, and Forster, I'm not saying they would all come up at the same time, but uh, just from a numbers perspective, like not all of them can be third liners. So
Correct.
I think, you know, I would hope at least one of them could be a solid second liner if not a fill-in first liner. And I'm looking at you, Tyson Forster, and as far as that potential. But I think that given Denoye's size, I don't think he'll get beyond a third line. He could maybe stretch to second line in the Flyers organization. I think other teams might give him a shot at a higher level, but knowing the
Yeah.
Flyers, I don't think so. So I think that's really going to be the issue is like when do those three hit and at what level would they be at on the team will depend on like their chances.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
The next question, this is now kind of loaded, but from a YouTube user, Scarface615, should the Flyers be looking to move players like Braun, Provorov, JVR, Couturier, and Hayes in an attempt to get numerous draft picks in this year's draft class?
Okay, I mean, while this is a good draft class, this isn't like a 2003 draft class, right? So if and I talked about this on Sirius XM, if Provorov does get moved, let's say because Vancouver is so anxious to make a deal and you can't pass up the deal because it's so good. My issue is you're still going to need players. You can't make it all draft picks and prospects. So one of these deals has to be sort of like a hockey deal, and I would make that with Provorov because he's your most marketable asset of any of the other guys. The rest of the guys, yeah, you're going to get picks and you get the best picks that you can for them, and you hope that some of them are in this draft. With Braun, it probably won't be in this draft. With JVR, it will be, but if it's in this draft, it might be a third instead of a second in next year's draft. You know what I mean? Like there's going to be some little dividing lines like that, and you take what you can get with that, and you move on. I don't think anybody's taking Kevin Hayes, so
No,
we'll just move on from that. And Sean Couturier, nobody would trade for him. We don't even know if he's
no.
playing this year, so it's kind of a moot point.
Yeah, I think Provorov is the question mark here. I think they're going to try and move Braun and
Yeah,
JVR for sure. Along with maybe Sealer and a couple of the other expiring contracts. But
they won't move
I,
Nick Sealer. I'm telling you, I'm going to make the prediction right now.
well, they
They,
might try, but
I
it
don't
may
think they're
not
going to try.
happen.
I think the coach and the GM would be at odds about that, and I'm not just saying it to be a jerk. That's my gut feeling.
All right. Well, stay tuned. We'll see if your prediction comes true. And stay tuned for more mailbag questions coming up next. All right, we have a good question from Mario. When did broadcasters start only mentioning the line combinations at the start of the game and you have to read them at the top of the screen? Gene Hart did it right when he did his simulcasts and mentioning it more often. And when did broadcasters stop saying who was out on the ice at the time of a face-off?
Wow. Yeah, I didn't get to hear Gene Hart. I moved to this area a little late. It was in like the mid to late 90s. So wasn't watching, didn't have the station, whatever, and radio wise was too busy working. So if I go back to what a New York broadcast was or a national broadcast, what I think the first time that I remember seeing them do this was at All-Star games. So I want to say somebody like NBC did this for All-Star games, but they maybe not every team was doing it for all games. That's my best recollection. I wish I'd give a better answer, but I can't single it out in my mind.
Yeah, I think the answer is sort of in the question because when you have a simulcast, you have to describe things for radio listeners.
Right.
And so that's why you heard the names mentioned more often. Whereas now they're depending on, the visual of TV plus closed captioning, plus everything that's on the screen. Plus you have second screen on the internet where you
Hmm.
can like watch the game cast and everything is there for you. So they're trying to do a little bit less hand holding with that sort of thing. But there are some times where I would like to hear a little bit more. So I understand where the point of the question is coming from.
Yeah, I get that
Um,
part. I do.
yeah, I think, sometimes you just want to know, I think they do a decent job of saying who is taking the face off, especially if somebody gets dinged and has to switch out with somebody. They do a good job of that. But yeah, it is a delicate balance with the broadcast and trying to be engaging, but not tell people things that they can most likely see in front of their faces if they're not visually impaired. So,
Yeah, the unfortunate part is, I guess, the teams in today's world that have sort of cut back and are doing the all-in-one broadcast, the viewer loses out, and these are some of the finer points I feel like
yeah,
they lose out on.
yeah. This is another good question. If you are Torts, how do you balance keeping these lines consistent because of success and growth versus getting other guys chances or trying new things?
Well, I think they're rapidly coming up against the point that in like 2 weeks, when they see that they're clearly out of it, I don't think there should be any set lines at that point. I think that's when you really start these developmental lines and looking towards the future. There's going to be a point where John Tortorella has to say, okay, even if he doesn't admit it publicly, he doesn't have to, but he has to just say, okay, I see what's happening here. So now I've got to see what maybe looks good for next year. And I think that's coming. I think that's very soon.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think that when you are, in a point where you're on a hot streak and you want to keep that going, of course you want to keep these lines consistent and you want to, keep the good vibes going, so to speak, and try and win some more games and have some positivity around the team. But yeah, I think, if they start losing a little bit more, or if post trade deadline you want to try some other stuff out, I think that that is definitely the way to go. We've got one more question here. Florida has been having a rough season. Do you think there's a shot that that 2024 first rounder will push to 2025?
Uh, I don't know what the terms are. What's
It's a top 10 protected pick.
okay?
So,
I don't think they're going to be in the top 10. They could, but my sense is they probably won't be. So I don't think that's going to happen.
yeah, I think we'll see what they do in this next off season, and that'll kind of determine what next year will look like for them, and we'll know
Right.
kind of what the chances are then. I think it's almost too soon to start
Yeah.
thinking about
Yeah, because
that.
I'm trying to think what they'll look like next year too. But I still think they're in a win now mode next year. So it all depends on how much cap space they have. There's a lot of variables.
Yeah. All right, that will do it for today's show. We will be back tomorrow. Of course, we're going to preview the game against the Blackhawks. We're going to talk about a prospect that Russ saw recently in person, Will Smith. And we will also be continuing to talk about the fallout from this Ivan Provorov situation. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So if you want your question answered on the show, you can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail. You can tweet us at lockedonflyers or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great day, everyone.